The messages get shorter. The laughter fades. You sit there staring at your phone wondering when things changed and why it suddenly feels so hard just to be around someone who used to feel like home. You try to fix it. You replay conversations, pray a little harder, hold on a little tighter. But something keeps slipping through your hands, and it hurts, not loudly but quietly, in those moments when you realize the connection just isn't the same anymore. I've felt that kind of slow distance before, and it leaves you questioning everything. Sometimes we assume it's something we did wrong, or that if we just try harder, things will go back to how they were. But Scripture reminds us that not every separation is a failure. Some are guided. In Ecclesiastes 3:1, it says, "To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven." That includes relationships. There are moments when God allows people to step out of our lives, not to harm us, but to move us according to His timing and purpose. It's difficult to accept, especially when your heart is still holding on. But not every ending is meant to be resisted. Some are meant to be trusted, and when you begin to see it through that lens, the pain doesn't disappear, but it starts to make sense. Number 1. When peace is replaced by constant confusion. At first, it's subtle. You can't quite explain it, but something feels off. Conversations that used to be easy now feel tense. Simple words turn into misunderstandings. You walk away from interactions feeling unsettled instead of at peace. And the more you try to fix it, the more complicated it seems to become. It's like you're constantly trying to find solid ground, but everything feels unstable beneath your feet. This kind of confusion isn't something to ignore. The Bible speaks clearly about the nature of God's presence in our lives. When a connection repeatedly produces anxiety, tension, and emotional chaos, it's worth paying attention to what that might mean. Sometimes we hold on because of history, because of memories, because of who that person used to be in our lives. And so we excuse the confusion. We tell ourselves it's just a rough season. We convince ourselves that if we just try harder, communicate better, or be more patient, things will settle again. But deep down, there's a quiet awareness that something has shifted, and not in a healthy way. God often uses peace as a form of guidance. Not just external peace, but internal peace. The kind that settles your spirit even when things around you aren't perfect. When that peace is consistently missing in a relationship, it may be a sign that something is no longer aligned with His will for your life. It doesn't always mean the other person is bad or intentionally harmful. Sometimes it simply means the season has changed, and what once brought harmony is now bringing confusion. And that confusion can be exhausting. You find yourself overthinking every message, second-guessing every interaction, and carrying a weight that was never meant to stay on your shoulders. Instead of feeling encouraged, you feel drained. Instead of clarity, you feel fog. Over time, that emotional strain begins to affect not just the relationship, but your own sense of stability and direction. God does not lead His people into ongoing confusion without purpose. If anything, He uses that discomfort to draw your attention, to help you recognize what no longer brings His peace into your life. It becomes less about fixing the other person and more about discerning what God may be doing in you and around you. And as that realization begins to settle in, another question naturally follows. What happens when a relationship doesn't just bring confusion, but slowly begins to pull you away from God Himself? Number 2, when you're being pulled away from God, not closer. And that question matters more than we sometimes realize. Because not every relationship is neutral. Some quietly shape your direction, your priorities, even your spiritual life. At first, you may not notice it. You're still praying, still believing, still holding on to your faith. But little by little, something begins to shift. Your focus drifts. Your time with God becomes less consistent. The hunger you once had starts to fade, and you can't quite explain why. It doesn't always look obvious. It can be subtle, choosing their voice over God's, their approval over conviction, their presence over obedience. You start making compromises you once wouldn't have considered, not because you've stopped loving God, but because the relationship has slowly taken a place it was never meant to have. And over time, that misplacement begins to affect your walk in ways that are hard to ignore. Scripture speaks directly to this kind of influence. In 1 Corinthians 15:33, it says, "Do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good character." This isn't about labeling people as entirely bad or good. It's about recognizing the impact someone has on your life. Even well-meaning relationships can pull you away from God if they are not aligned with His truth. Influence is powerful, and over time, it shapes who you are becoming. God calls us into relationships that strengthen our faith, not weaken it. Hebrews 10:24 reminds us to consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works. That means the people closest to you should be encouraging your growth, not distracting from it. They should remind you of who you are in Christ, not make you forget. When that's not happening, something is out of place. And this is where it becomes difficult, because your heart may still care deeply for that person. You may still see their value, their potential, the good in them. But love does not mean losing your direction. Caring for someone should never require you to step away from God's presence. When a relationship consistently pulls you further from Him, it creates a quiet but real tension inside. A sense that something isn't right even if you can't fully put it into words. Sometimes God allows that tension to grow so you will notice it. Not to condemn you, but to guide you. To show you that your relationship with Him must come first, even when it costs you something emotionally. Because He knows what is at stake. He knows how easily our hearts can be influenced, and how important it is to stay rooted in Him. Letting go in this situation isn't about rejecting the person. It's about choosing your alignment with God above everything else. It's about trusting that no relationship is worth losing your spiritual foundation. And when you begin to choose Him again, fully, intentionally, you may start to see something else happen. You try to hold the relationship together, but no matter what you do, things just don't seem to work anymore. Number 3, when doors keep closing no matter how hard you try, you start putting in more effort than ever. You reach out first. You try to fix misunderstandings. You pray, hoping something will shift. For a moment, it seems like things might improve, but then everything falls apart again. Plans get canceled. Conversations don't go anywhere. Opportunities to reconnect just disappear. And you're left wondering why nothing seems to work, no matter how sincere your intentions are. This is where it becomes heavy, because you're not careless, you're trying. You're showing up with patience, with humility, even with prayer. But the more you push forward, the more resistance you face. It feels like every door you try to open quietly shuts in front of you. Not dramatically, not all at once, but consistently enough that you can't ignore it anymore. The Bible shows us that closed doors are not always obstacles. They can be direction. In Revelation 3:7, it says, "What He opens no one can shut, and what He shuts no one can open." That means when God allows something to close, it's not because you didn't try hard enough. It's because He, in His authority, is guiding the outcome in a way you may not yet understand. And sometimes His no is just as intentional as His yes. We often believe that persistence will fix everything. And in some areas of life, that's true. But relationships are different when God's hand is involved. There are moments when continuing to push is no longer faith. It becomes resistance to what God is already making clear. Not every closed door is meant to be forced open again. Some are meant to be respected. And still, it's hard to accept, because part of you holds on to what used to be. You remember the connection, the meaning, the history. You tell yourself, maybe if I just try one more time. but deep down you begin to feel it. That quiet realization that this isn't just about effort anymore. Something beyond you is at work. God doesn't always explain why he closes certain doors, but he does promise that his ways are purposeful. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." Direction sometimes comes through restriction, through things not working even when you wish they would. And over time you begin to see a pattern. It's not just one failed attempt, it's consistent. The connection no longer flows, the door no longer stays open. And slowly you realize that what you're trying to hold together may no longer be where God wants you to remain. Then something else begins to happen. Your eyes start to open in ways they didn't before. Things you once overlooked become clear, and truths you didn't want to face begin to surface. Number 4, when God exposes what was hidden. At some point, things you once ignored start becoming impossible to overlook. Small moments begin to stand out. Words that didn't seem important before now carry weight. Patterns you once excused start repeating in ways that feel undeniable. It's not that these things suddenly appeared, they were always there. But now you can see them clearly. This kind of clarity can feel uncomfortable, even painful, because it forces you to confront a reality you may not have wanted to accept. You start realizing that what you believed about the relationship isn't fully true anymore. Or maybe it never was. And that realization can feel like a quiet breaking inside, where illusion gives way to truth. The Bible shows that God often reveals before he removes. In Luke 8:17 it says, "For nothing is secret that shall not be made manifest, neither anything hid that shall not be known and come abroad." God, in his wisdom, brings things into the light, not to shame you, but to protect you, because you cannot walk away from something you refuse to see clearly. Sometimes we hold on to an idea of a person rather than who they truly are. We focus on their potential, their past, or the good moments while overlooking the patterns that don't align with truth. But when God begins to open your eyes, he gently removes that filter. Not all at once, but enough for you to recognize what's really happening. And this isn't always about the other person doing something extreme or obvious. It can be subtle: lack of honesty, inconsistency, emotional distance, or intentions that don't match their words. Things that slowly erode trust and peace over time. When God reveals these things, it's often his way of helping you step back and see the relationship from his perspective, not just your feelings. That's why this stage feels so different. You're no longer confused in the same way as before. There's a growing clarity, even if it's painful. You begin to understand why things felt off, why peace was missing, why the connection became strained. What once felt uncertain now starts to make sense. And still, there can be a temptation to ignore it, to go back to what felt familiar, to convince yourself that maybe you're overthinking or being too sensitive. But truth, once revealed, doesn't disappear. It stays with you. It presses gently on your heart, asking you to acknowledge it. God reveals not to push you into fear, but to lead you into wisdom, to help you discern what is healthy, what is aligned, and what is no longer meant for you. Because walking in truth is the only way you can move forward in peace. And as you begin to accept what has been revealed, another layer becomes clear. Not just what is happening, but how different your paths have become. What once felt aligned now feels divided, and you can sense that you are no longer walking in the same direction. Number 5, when the relationship becomes spiritually unequal. That difference in direction doesn't always show up all at once. It grows quietly. You begin to notice that your values are no longer aligned the way they used to be. The things that matter deeply to you, your faith, your convictions, your desire to grow spiritually, don't seem to carry the same weight for them anymore. Or maybe they never did. And now you're finally seeing it clearly. At first, you try to bridge the gap. You adjust. You explain. You hope they'll understand, or even grow in the same direction with you. But over time, it starts to feel like you're walking two separate paths while trying to stay side by side. One step forward for you feels like tension for them. What brings you closer to God seems to create distance in the relationship. The Bible addresses this kind of imbalance directly. In 2 Corinthians 6:14, it says, "Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers, for what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness?" This doesn't mean we are called to judge or separate from people entirely, but it does speak to the depth of connection and partnership. A yoke represents two being joined together, moving in the same direction. When that alignment is missing, the weight becomes uneven, and eventually it becomes difficult to move forward at all. This kind of spiritual mismatch creates tension that goes deeper than surface-level differences. It affects decisions, priorities, and the direction of your life. You may feel pulled between staying true to your faith and maintaining the relationship, and that pull can be exhausting because it places your heart in a constant state of conflict. What makes it harder is that you may still care deeply for them. You may see good qualities, shared history, even moments of connection that feel real. But spiritual alignment isn't about occasional agreement. It's about consistent direction. And when that direction is no longer shared, the relationship begins to strain in ways that love alone cannot fix. God calls you to walk in truth, even when it costs you comfort. And sometimes that truth reveals that not every relationship is meant to continue at the same depth or closeness. It's not always about one person being right and the other wrong. Sometimes it's simply about recognizing that you are being led differently, and trying to force unity where there is no alignment will only create more strain. This realization can feel like a quiet grief, not because something dramatic happened, but because you can sense what is slowly coming to an end. You begin to understand that staying may require you to compromise parts of your faith that were never meant to be compromised. And as that understanding settles in, something else becomes undeniable. You're getting tired, not just emotionally, but deeply, in a way that affects your spirit. Holding on no longer feels strong. It starts to feel heavy. Number 6. When holding on hurts more than letting go. That heaviness doesn't arrive all at once. It builds over time. What you once carried with hope, you now carry with exhaustion. You keep showing up, keep trying, keep holding on, but instead of feeling strength, you feel drained. Conversations feel like effort. Being present feels like pressure. And deep inside, there's a quiet question forming: why does this feel so hard now? You may not want to admit it at first, because letting go feels like giving up. It feels like failure. So you push through the discomfort, telling yourself that love requires endurance, and it does. But not every kind of endurance is meant to last forever. There is a difference between persevering through a healthy struggle and holding on to something that is slowly breaking you down. Jesus offers a different picture of what it means to carry what is truly from God. In Matthew 11:28-30, he says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." That doesn't mean life is always easy, but it does mean that what God places in your life will not continually crush your spirit. When something consistently leaves you feeling weary, anxious, and depleted, it's worth asking whether you're carrying something God is asking you to release. This is where many people struggle the most, because the pain of holding on becomes familiar, even if it's unhealthy. You know what to expect, you know how to cope, but letting go feels unknown, and that uncertainty can be frightening. So you stay, even when staying hurts more than leaving ever could. Over time, though, your heart begins to recognize the truth. You're not growing in this space anymore. You're surviving it, and there's a difference. Growth brings life, even when it's challenging. Survival, on the other hand, slowly drains you. It keeps you in a place where you're constantly trying to recover instead of move forward. God does not call you to remain in something that continually diminishes you. He may allow seasons of difficulty, but He also provides grace, strength, and peace within those seasons. When those are consistently absent, it may be His way of showing you that the season itself is coming to an end. Letting go in this context is not weakness, it's obedience. It's trusting that God sees what you feel but cannot fully explain. It's choosing to release what is hurting you, even when your heart still cares. And that choice is never easy, but it is often necessary. And as you begin to loosen your grip, even slightly, something shifts, not immediately around you, but within you. A small sense of clarity begins to form, a quiet awareness that maybe, just maybe, God is leading you somewhere new. Because sometimes it's not just about what you're leaving behind, it's about where God is calling you to go next. Number 7. When you sense God calling you forward without them, that quiet shift inside you starts to become clearer. It's not loud, it's not forced, but it's steady. You begin to feel that God is doing something new in your life. Something that requires movement, growth, and a deeper level of trust. And as that sense grows, there's also an awareness that not everyone can go with you into that next season. It's a difficult realization because your heart may still be connected to them. You may still care, still remember what you shared, still wish things could somehow align again. But the direction you feel God leading you in no longer matches where they are or where they're willing to go. And that difference becomes impossible to ignore. The Bible shows this pattern clearly. In Genesis 12:1, it says, "Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee." Sometimes God's direction in your life will require separation, not because someone is bad, but because they are not part of where He is taking you. And that can feel deeply personal, even when it's not meant to be. It's not always about conflict. Sometimes it's simply about purpose. You may notice that your desires are changing, your priorities are shifting. What once satisfied you no longer feels enough. You feel drawn toward growth, toward something deeper in your faith, toward a life that reflects more of who God is shaping you to become. And while you're moving in that direction, the other person remains where they are, or moves differently. Trying to force them into your next season often leads to more frustration. Not because they're resisting you, but because they're not called to walk that same path. And when you try to carry someone into a place God has not prepared them for, it creates strain that neither of you were meant to bear. This is where trust becomes essential. Trusting that God's calling is not random. Trusting that if He is leading you forward, He is also making a way for you. Isaiah 55:8-9 reminds us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord." His plans often stretch beyond what we can immediately understand, especially when they involve letting go of people we care about. There's also a quiet peace that begins to appear here. Not the absence of sadness, but a sense of direction. You start to realize that staying where you are would mean ignoring what God is placing on your heart. And as hard as it is, you know you cannot do that. So you begin to take small steps forward, not with complete certainty, not without emotion, but with faith. And in that movement, you start to see that this isn't just about loss, it's about calling. It's about becoming who God is leading you to be, even if the path forward looks different than you expected. And as you continue walking in that direction, you begin to understand something deeper. Letting go was never the end of the story. It was the beginning of trusting God in a new way. Conclusion: trusting God's removal is an act of faith. Letting someone go is never simple. Even when the signs are clear, your heart doesn't always follow right away. There's still memory, still care, still that quiet hope that things could have been different. And yet, somewhere along the way, you begin to understand. This wasn't slucheno. This wasn't without purpose. God was at work, even in the loss. Trust doesn't mean you feel okay immediately. It means you choose to believe that God sees beyond what you can see, that His decisions are not careless, that when He removes someone, He is not taking something good away without reason. He is making space for something aligned with His will. And sometimes that space is meant for healing, for growth, for a deeper relationship with Him. It's okay to grieve what you've lost, but don't lose sight of what you're being led into, because God doesn't just remove, He restores, He redirects, and He rebuilds. And in time you may look back and realize what felt like an ending was actually protection all along.